Welcome back, friends and fellow philosophers, to this Wild Isle podcast. I have with me the one and only author of Vampire Mall Cop, the internet series, and novel you see behind me, Vampire Mall Cop, Damien versus the Entrail Eater. Please welcome Molly Blake. How are you doing, Molly?
I'm doing good, thank you. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Yes, Molly so graciously came on the podcast despite being surrounded by the Gestapo. So if you hear her whisper just a little bit, it is because there are brown shirts and black shirts trolling the hallways of her own domicile. So that's why. Um, Now, today we're going to do another one of our Wild Isle author interviews. We're going to do a deep dive into Molly's origins as an author, what brought her to where she's at now, her process, the writing experience, and then other interesting and fun, say, authorial questions. So, Molly, without further ado, we'll get into it. So, I really want to know as far back as memory might serve, what event or series of events do you think set you on the path to even attempting to write a story in the first place?
Like any story?
Any story, yeah, like but not the event of that first story. What I want to know is what was it that set you on the path that ultimately led to the initial attempt, and as far back as you think is relevant.
Well, I always did like to read as a kid, and I also liked to tell stories. I've been told that I was a good storyteller when I was wee. Um, and also when I was little, I think like 6 or 7, I would start like stapling together my own little books and then coloring them in with crayons and writing stories about like magical horses that solved mysteries. And then I guess the urge to write stories never really left me. Um, so I have pretty much been writing something my entire life, either like extensive journaling or stories or what have you. But yeah, I don't really remember an event that kicked it off.
Did your
If there was
parents
one, it happened when I was very small.
Yeah, did your parents read to you as a kid?
Oh yeah, a lot.
A lot. I've heard that from quite a lot of people, and that seems to have really, really, really made the difference. I mean, I read to my own kids, and so I can understand uh, why. So as far back as you can remember, you've always been writing stories. What was the first thing that you've ever written?
It okay, the one that I still have somewhere. I don't know where it is, but it was just like a couple ripped out notebook pages stapled together, and it was called like King Bear Learns to Share, and it was about this suspiciously amoeba-shaped teddy bear who like gave a horse his crown so the horse could feel pretty or something. Um, I was not an artist. I'm still not an artist. I will never claim to be an effective artist, but the story existed, and then from that spawned all of the magical horse ones, which I don't remember the names of. Um,
So that
but
was
there
a
were a ton of
series then,
them.
like a
Yeah,
series of 10 magic horse. So we
magic
have,
horse mystery book thingies.
how old were you at the time, roughly?
I think that banned from like 2007 to a couple years after. So I started when I was 5 or 6.
Have you ever considered publishing them as children's stories?
Those ones, probably not.
No,
One of
that would
them
be
was
pretty
just a
amazing.
straight up Magic School Bus fan fiction because I discovered Magic School Bus and I'm like, oh, what if this one horse gets like transported to Africa and learns about the savannah or something? So I don't want to tread on Elastic's toes. You'd
Right.
have
It's
to
not,
come up with
no,
something wildly different for
yeah,
probably most of them.
no lawsuits by Scholastic. I understand, but do consider that because that would be quite a thing to release a series of kids' books that you wrote when you were a kid. Uh, I don't know. I'm sure someone else has done that before, but I don't know of it. So it would be at least a little bit novel, something to put out there. What was the very first thing that you actually published though, for public consumption? Was it the Vampire Mall Cop series online?
Close to it. I had done a couple other microfictions around. If you remember Parlor, I was on there before it exploded, and there was this other user who would post daily, like, kind of obscure-ish words, and Parlor had like 1,000 word, not 1,000 word, I think 1,000 character limit. So you'd like write a little short story and you'd include that word. And was I was writing this one about like this health inspector who goes to this guy's house, and like it's this very suspicious house, and he thinks he's like about to get murdered, but actually he's already dead, and it's actually just like a ploy to get him to go to hell without freaking out, and then he just starts inspecting hell, and I had to read OSHA regulations for research for that, so that was delightful. I never finished that one because of Parlor's explosion. Um, but that was the first one.
Do you still have the text, or did that get lost with Parlor?
The original stories did. I think I have a file somewhere with some of them. Um, but yeah, right now it's not on the internet anywhere.
Well, I hope that one day it does arise to the net. I would like to see that story. It sounds like a lot of fun. It sounds like a story that I thought of shortly before the house fire. We were working in the house, and I thought of a cool story with a contractor who made a, because the idea of making a contract with the devil where he has to basically try to fix a haunted house that's trying to prevent him from fixing it and trying to kill him. That reminded me quite a lot of that, and I'd like to see your take on it. I'm sure it would be a lot of fun. Um, but I guess the question that popped into my mind as you were talking is, what motivated you back then, all the way at 5 years old, to write, and then how did your motivations develop? You know, up to that story and up to now.
Um, I think I always wanted to be an author. I didn't know like everything that went into it though. So hence the little 5-year-old me like stapling the books together and being like, "Hey mom, I wrote a book. I'm an author. Yippee." But then as I got older, I definitely did get more into the like let's do this properly sort of thing. Um I had written other stories. The first one that I had intended to go public, at least, was the one where I sourced my file picture from. The Night Captain is the villain in that, and my profile picture is a frame from a short animation that a friend made of him. And I paused it at the right moment and I'm like, oh, it looks like the meme. But yeah, that one, it was called Escape the Night Ship, or it is called Escape the Night Ship, rather. I actually like went through the thing like trying to officially format it, and I went through querying agents, and I was trying to get it traditionally published at 16 years old. Um, because that's what I really wanted to do. And like I had other people be like, "Oh, why don't you like ask my parents like, "Oh, why don't you just get her self-published?" And I was like, "No, I want to go through the proper route." Um, because I was a pretentious little child. Um, that one kind of I still have that one, and I have the two sequels because I wrote a whole trilogy for it. That there were various kerfuffles that happened in the try to get this published through the traditional route that kind of made me shelve the series as a whole. Um, I think I lost the original question. I think I just went off on my own tangent there.
A little bit, but it's an interesting tangent. We'll definitely
I'm
come back
sorry.
to it. It was about motivation, like
Ah,
because look,
yes, motivate.
yeah, because you were ultra prolific, right? I tried at 16 years old to write a novel as well, and I got like 4 pages, 4 like notebook pages in, and excuse me, I gave it up until I was back in college. I think it was my sophomore year at university. But you were already querying agents, relative to the age where I attempted that, probably 10 more. No, no, it would be even maybe 12 years before. So, what gave you the um, I was about to say courage, and it's certainly there's a courage in that because you have to face rejection, like a bunch of rejection. It's not just one. You query like 100 agents, and 100 say no, right? That's how it is.
Yep.
What made you believe in yourself to think that, especially at 16, that you could do it, and what gave you the drive to get to face up against the rejection?
Um, well, I'd had several people around me read it, a lot of friends, but also like a lot of family members who were gonna be like much more critical and not just like, "Oh yeah, you're my friend. This is great." Um, I also trust my friends to give me honest feedback too, but maybe not at like 15 years old. Um, but I knew that I had something, and I knew that even like the very critical people who I showed it to, they thought it was good. They thought it was something worth it, worth doing. And I was like, well, I've finished this whole thing. I gotta do something with it now. So that's primarily why I kept going.
Is people
Because
believed
I
in
had all
you?
these stories in my head and I wanted to get them out, and I didn't know how else at the time to get them out. So,
Can I ask
yep.
about that? Because I've heard of many, many authors. When I was in graduate school, a few different people would say the same thing. I had all these stories in my head, and I just had to get them out, almost verbatim. I've heard that. Could you describe that experience in any more depth than that? Just because it's not a phrase that I've used, and so I suspect maybe it's tied into a different experience as an author, perhaps, than some other types of authors may have. I'm sure many, if there's any authors listening to this, probably have the same experience as you. But if you could do your best to just describe exactly what you mean when you say, "I have all these stories in my head," and like you need to find this way to get them out, like as best you can. Describe that feeling.
Well, when I come up with like scenes and characters, I'll usually like not be able to stop thinking about those until at the very least write them down. Um, so I'd be like thinking about this stuff before I go to bed. I'd be zoning out when I had other stuff to do and just like playing out various scenes in my head. Then I'd finally write them down and I'd be like, "Oh, this is cool." And then I'd show it to some friends and they'd also be like, "Hey, this is cool." So I was like, "Oh, this is probably cool enough to show lots of people." So that's what I tried to do with it.
That sounds like something I just read in. I've got this book. It's up on my shelf. Psychology and Alchemy by Carl Jung. There's a it's a bunch of his essays, but in one of the essays he describes the artist and how the artist becomes possessed by their art to the point where it starts to dominate even over their consciousness, and they become a kind of I don't want to say a slave to it, but what's it the Nietzsche might say something like to have a virtue is to have this thing that's constantly backbiting you and constantly pushing you to do what it wants you to do. Is it little bit like that? Like once the idea emerges, wherever it emerges into your consciousness, you've seen it, and then now it's like, no, 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 you serve me. You need to bring me into being, Molly. Is that a bit what
Y-
it's like?
Yeah, pretty much.
Where do the ideas come from? These scenes that
Um,
appear in your mind.
a variety of places, especially with the Vampire Mall Cop shorts, because there's so many of them. They come from all over. Um, a lot are inspired by prompts because the whole thing started with like a writing competition based on prompts. Some are just like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if they did this? Um, some come from like particular character moments that I want to show, and then I'll be like, oh, if I make this happen, then I can show this by having this character react this way to it. Some of them just come from memes. I had somebody there's this one Vampire Mall Cop short. where Ben gets mind controlled by this this Facebook group where people pretend to be ants, which is a real thing. The Facebook group where people pretend to be ants. So then he gets like mind controlled and he's like, I must feed the queen. And he starts digging through the garbage. And then Damien follows him into the woods, being like, what the heck are you doing? So that was inspired by somebody sending me that video. And I was very much amused by it. So yeah, pretty much anywhere. Dreams too. The clown elf one comes from a horrendous nightmare that I had. So yeah, inspiration is absolutely everywhere.
Do you ever take inspiration? So those are all, personal or happenstance things. Do you ever take inspiration from either other works of fiction, whether they're written, films, games, anything like that?
I try not to, but at some point, like if you do read enough or like watch enough things, that is going to like leach in and affect you however it does. So there might be like inadvertent things, um, but I try not to make anything like super direct.
Yeah. What's something that is present in other, let's say, books or even movies, whatever form of media that you absolutely try to avoid replicating in your own work at all costs? Like the one thing that you see, maybe you see it everywhere, maybe you've only seen it once, but you hate it, and you're like, no, 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 I don't want to, I don't want that to appear in my own writing.
Um, Probably many of the romantasy tropes, the paranormal romance thing, icky, not a fan.
Describe it for me as someone who does not read nearly enough romantasy. So
Okay, so it's pretty
yeah.
much like I guess it's pretty much like the Twilight thing where the human person falls in love with the monster and then it's just like some uh very I it's not even always like good wholesome romance. Like some of the times it's just like dirty and it's not fun. Um and it's more focused on like the romance as opposed to the fantasy aspect. And I'm like, never. If I ever do that, find me and shoot me because I've been replaced.
So clearly you've read a little bit of that stuff, but I'm assuming that means that you haven't read as much, let's say, romance as other genres of fiction.
I do try to avoid it. There was one series that like I got for free or for really cheap from like a library sale or something, which I didn't think it was gonna go that way, and there was like more of a plot than just that, so it did get me to care enough. Um, I don't remember what it's called, unfortunately.
That's all right. What makes you averse to, let's say, typical romance novels?
It's just not the kind of stuff that I want to read or write, so I'd rather have more of like I guess I still would like a character-driven plot, but I would like to have more like external things than just like, oh, will they, won't they kind of deal.
So the formulaic nature of the singular plot typing is what kind of turns you off. It's boring more than anything.
Yeah, kind of. Because I mean, like with fantasy, you can do anything. You can make anything happen. And so many people just make the fairies or the vampires or whatever fall in love with the humans. And I'm like, that guys, come on. So
Mm. So I don't suspect that we'll ever see, um, you know, for those who don't know, this will be not as funny. But we won't ever see Damien having, let's say, a taboo love affair with Aunt Tildy, for instance.
not with Aunt Tilly, no.
No. So do you ever handle romantic subplots in let's say the broader either your broader fiction or we could even stick with the vampire mall cop universe. For those listening, I've read through Damien versus the Entrail Eater. I haven't had a chance to get through, unfortunately, the rest of the free serial that's available. But in terms of romantic subplots, is that something that you're just not going to pursue through any of those?
Um, maybe as like a very small side plot, because I know there is a prequel one that I'm going to write later, where it takes place in like 1500. I don't remember the exact year, but it follows Damien pretty much like after he runs away and becomes a serf. And during that point he gets married. So I will have to tackle it. But it's not gonna be it's gonna be like cute and wholesome. Because Kadia is cute and wholesome. Kadia is his
Mhm.
wife. Um,
Yeah,
so yeah,
so
I'm gonna have to at least touch on it, but it's not gonna be like a huge focus.
yeah, well, it sounds like you could kind of avoid a lot of the let's say cliches that are so boring to if they're already married, right? You could just have a person in a functional relationship, which is very different from the plot type of the conflict being where will they form a functional relationship if they're already in one. Um, and so that's going to be one of your works in progress, right? So we've got a prequel where we get to see Damien. Is this before he was turned, or is this shortly after, or is that a secret? Are we
Damien
not
was
allowed to
not
know?
turned. He was born a vampire.
Oh, that must
His
be.
parents were
Did I
both
forget
vampires.
that, or is that in the serial?
That is in the serial.
Okay. So my mistake. My apologies, friends and fellow philosophers, for that embarrassing fumble there. Um,
No, you're totally good. I've had lots of people ask.
Well, why don't we dig into that, right? So, and again, we could venture outside of this if you want to talk about anything else that you've written. But you're handling vampires. Vampires are a monster that has been in the modern day done to death. How do your vampires conform to how we would expect vampires to be? But then also, how do you deviate? How do what makes the vampires in your writing something just a little bit different than we are used to seeing?
Well, Damien has two stomachs, so that's one thing. Um, that's the immediate one. He actually didn't know that until Ben told him, and he's very disturbed. He wishes he did not know that. Uh, but a lot of the powers and weaknesses, they're pretty similar. A lot of those are like inspired by Stoker, so they're kind of like a I wouldn't say a necessity, but like they're very if you don't have them, then you're like, whoa, this is weird. So I do have those. Also, there's a canonical reason that a lot of the strengths and weaknesses align with the Stoker Dracula one, which is a funny anecdote. Um, but that's not quite. Maybe a larger one would be how vulnerable they can be. Um, because I had a reviewer point that out actually, because he was used to reading a lot of these urban fantasy things where like the monster is basically just a superhuman. Um, and he was surprised and kind of delighted that the fact that Damien can get hurt and that he does take wounds in the book. So I think that that might be something that I do different in this day and age because I know that, yeah, a lot of, especially with the romantasy ones, the supernatural creature is pretty much just human but cooler. But Damien is not that.
We've got double-stomached vampires who are somewhat vulnerable. You mentioned an anecdote. Can you elaborate on that?
It's going to be revealed later in the series, but
Okay.
I thought it would be really funny if the reason that a lot of that I've taken some of the Stoker weaknesses and strengths, but not all of them, would be because um Bram Stoker is actually canonically a vampire, and he went to the family and he's like, "Hey, wouldn't it be cool if I wrote this book about how about one of us being evil and then like humans killing us?" And they were all like, "No! No, you can't do that." So he's like, "Okay, what if I throw in some fake ones?" And then they're like, "Fine." You can do that. So I thought that would be funny. And that's gonna be a funny little joke. Because in the book with the family reunion, there's going to be some rather amusing relatives of Damien's that are going to show up. Another
That
one
is
that I
actually
really
really
like is Alfonso, his cousin from Germany, who just collects doctorates like video game achievements. Like he just keeps going to school and he just keeps collecting doctorates in everything. He wants to become the ultimate doctor. And I think that would be really funny that he just has all of these random skills because he's like, oh yeah, I studied this in like 1862 or something.
that, no, those are really funny. I like the inclusion of Stoker as a vampire, being the guy who originated the novel. That's a bit tongue in cheek and fun. You know, from what I've read of your writing, your style is that way in large part. I would just, it's not that there aren't dark moments, but for the most part, um, things seem somewhat lighthearted, somewhat fun. Um, there are, let's say you don't take yourself too seriously. I can't remember his name. I apologize, but he is the helicopter pilot who came through. I think like a was it an interdimensional portal through a helicopter to pick them up and versus the Entrail Eater. Do you remember? You probably remember his know who I'm talking about.
He was Alan.
Alan, yeah, and Alan, you have to be quite brave to just decide I'm going to put a creature like this that if I remember again, it's been a little while, but he's got like gloves that have hands, so he can have hands because otherwise he has hooves. Am I
Yeah.
remembering right? Yeah, right. So
Yep.
to to go all the way that far, you have to really be not afraid that someone's gonna roll their eyes. Where does that spirit come from in your writing? Is that just part of your personality? Is that how you are in person? It just comes through your work? Is it a consequence of the things that you'd read growing up? Is it because you started so early that you've maintained this kind of, let's say, um, I don't want to say childlike because that sounds derogatory, but I mean like that sense of play, like you're playing when you're writing. Where does that come from?
Probably mostly because that is definitely a factor of like who I am as a person. I'm definitely very much like that. I've had people like read my book and say like, "Oh yeah, this sounded like I was talking to you." And then yeah, honestly the play thing, because writing is a lot of fun for me because you can just do whatever. Um, and I like making whatever happen.
Yeah. What's interesting about that, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but your writing is typically first person present tense. I think we did a whole podcast, so I should remember this. But is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Vampire
Well,
Mall Cop is first person present. I mm, I usually write third person for other things.
hmm, why the difference?
I think Vampire Mall Cop kind of calls for it just because it's when you're in the main character's head, especially in a story where like one, there's so much weirdness and the audience does kind of need somebody who's not as accustomed to the weirdness to anchor themselves to. And then two, when there's like action scenes going on, it does make it feel all that more urgent and like closer. So I think it really does help with immersion for that. Um, but then when I write other thing, because Vampire Mall Cop, while not the only thing that I write, it's definitely the thing that people are most familiar with me writing. And I feel like if I did first person present for everything, then it would all sound like Vampire Mall Cop, and that's not something that I really want.
That's kind of why I asked that question because when they read VMP, they say it sounds like you, right? And though you're writing from Damien's perspective, which is kind of interesting that really is it that Damien sounds like Molly Blake. But you're how is it that you're able to sound both like Damien? I can, read in a funny Russian accent, and I did out loud to my stepdaughter the whole of that book. Uh, and it fits. It's not like it sounds like, you in that sense, but in terms of your writing style must map somewhat onto your mode of speech, or at least your personality, perhaps. Perhaps that's, or maybe it's the story structure. Maybe it's not even the voice. I guess I should collect that question into something that you can answer. How is it that you're able to both bring your own individual authorial voice to the piece while also maintaining Damien's voice as the narrator? Or is that just, do you have an answer for that? Is that something you thought about before, or is that question just totally new?
Definitely a newer question. Um, and I'm not quite sure how I will answer. I guess I probably restrain myself a little more when I'm writing Damien's voice. I've been far more accused of sounding like Ben, which I am very guilty of. Whenever somebody mentions it, I'm like, "Oh, rats, you found my self-insert. Dang it." Okay. Um, I definitely Ben's personality is very much like mine. Um, so at least with Damien, I definitely rein in the weirdness and the goofiness, at least a little. I try to make it feel like somebody who's experiencing that sort of strangeness for the first time. I'm not sure if I'm making sense. This is a
Yeah, you
question
are.
that I've
No,
never
you
gotten
absolutely
before.
are. Let me frame that. So something I was taught in grad school by Jason Ockert is that you write and you've got thin and thick ice. Imagine writing a book as or writing a character, or a character's dialogue even is like a lake. Around the edge of the lake, when it freezes, the ice is thicker and it gets thinner as you go toward the middle. And what you're trying to do is make it to where the reader can cross over this lake. And so you start at the periphery with thick ice, things that are familiar to you. And if you do a strong enough job there, as you move away from yourself, in this case, away from your own voice, what it sounds like to me is because the book and the narration style, and I think really the plot even reflects something that's more naturally you, and you can focus in on that. That's what it sounds like you care about a lot. Then when we get to Damien's voice, it's like, okay, uh, I'm going to be like Molly if I was thrown into, I don't know, pre-Soviet into Soviet Russia, right? And I lived through that, and I had these like, and I'm not, you start with yourself as a base, but you've managed to strip away some elements to allow the character that you have in your mind to come out. Um, Now, the question that just emerged here is when you, oh, I guess first I should ask, does that sound at least partially correct, what I just said?
Yes. And
Okay,
then
now I'm gonna
I
ask.
realized there was
Oh,
also another thing that I helped with that I used to help me write Damien and not make him sound like everyone else. Um, there's this one YouTuber who I've been watching for a long time. He's called Life of Boris, and he's this somewhere he doesn't reveal the exact country, but somewhere Slavic. He is this Slavic man who does these. He is unhinged and goofy, but in a very like sweet and wholesome way. He does a lot of cooking recipes, and they're all very good, but they're absolutely unhinged. Like he'll make soup with a chainsaw, like outside or something. And I tried to, I guess, filter Damien through that. Um, because a lot of Damien's goofiness could very much be interpreted like Life of Boris goofiness. And then I guess also some of the speech patterns, like not they're not as like super strong. Like, oh yeah, English is definitely not my first language because I did make the Damien's English and like his syntax and stuff a bit stronger because he has been speaking it for 50 years. But there's definitely a lot of inspiration and a lot of like filtered through Boris.
Yeah, that answers the question I was going to ask is exactly what you just answered there. It sounds like you take that strip down, and then you've got a number of outside influences for any given thing, and those come into, you know, the way I describe this to people, and tell me if this sounds right to you, is a lot of the time when we're writing, where we are Dr. Frankenstein and we are stitching together a monster. And what I find is the more different places and more pieces you get those places, or sorry, the more places you get those pieces from, the more, let's say, original, yet at the same time believable of uh, a story, a character, uh, a setting that you end up constructing by doing that. Is that does that sound like your process at all? That Frankensteining, or am I projecting my own bit of process onto you?
Say at least a little bit because especially with Vampire Malkat because there's so many places that I do get ideas from, and like so many places that I'll like get monsters from. Like sometimes it's folklore, sometimes it's just like, oh, what if a warehouse was a warehouse? Or like sometimes it's like entirely random things. So it's definitely like that, at least for the world. Maybe not so much for like the process, but it could be honestly the process also. I admittedly have not paid this close attention in my writing process. Um, but I could totally see that being a thing.
I'm gonna point your attention at your process. Let's just cover the basics, just for those people out there who might also be inspired to write, like you did. If I know if I was a listener and I was 16 and I heard that you started this when you were really started writing when you were 5, but you were trying to get traditionally published when you're a teenager, that's rather inspirational. So they might be able to be inspired by your routine if you have one, if it unless you're one of those like true sporadic artists who I rarely meet, to be honest. But how frequently do you write? I'll ask a slew of questions. So like, there's how frequently you write, and what time of the day typically is it, or is it inconsistent, and for how long, or is that also inconsistent, and in what location? Right. So like, and again, those might not be consistent for you, any of them. But we have frequency, we have time of day, we have how long during that time of day, and then where. There's four of them.
Um, I definitely try to write every day, except this semester has been weird because last semester I got very much hijacked and started handing things in late. So I was like, okay, time to force myself to stop for academic reasons. Um, but aside from that, absolutely every day, at least a little bit. Um, Time of day and duration also depends. Um, if I'm usually it's like if I don't have anything else to do, I'll just like grab it and start writing and I'll go for as long as I'm allowed until I like need to eat or sleep or something. Um, I usually write in bed. I have like a lap desk and it's cozy and I'll I'll do stuff there. I'll put on a podcast for background noise and I'll just go.
That's unique. Is it like, dude, I couldn't write when I had listening to someone talk. I would be too drawn to that, but that doesn't bother you at all.
Nope.
Look at that. That's a surprise. There was one other surprise in there that I wanted to ask about, but now, oh, the experience. So wasn't a surprise. It was just a question. What is it like? What does it feel like while you're actually writing? Like, what's the tangible mental and physical experience of writing for you? Is it I've heard writing very rarely described as exhilarating. I've heard it described as just tedious. I've heard it described as exhausting, and all different types of experiences when it comes to writing. What's it like for you?
I would absolutely call it exhilarating. It does feel like I'm there, like I'll feel the emotions that the characters are feeling very often, especially with some things that I wrote this semester because I was taking a fiction class and I just went completely off the rails with my things there. I'll be like giggling as I'm writing, sometimes giggling maniacally.
I've never
So yeah,
giggled
I get
maniacally.
very into it.
No, that's there's something that struck me there because it it very well may be that exhilaration. I should ask you, does that exhilaration come from the fact that you are, um, let's say, writing something that fundamentally reflects that I would describe it almost as an optimism, as someone who's probably more prone to pessimism. That's what it seems like to me. But is the exhilaration? Does it come from that, like from that same essence that makes someone say, "Absolutely, Molly, I could see that you wrote Vampire Mall Cop. It makes perfect sense to me that you wrote that." Even though Damien does sound like a Russian, it doesn't sound like Molly, but the book sounds like Molly. Does the exhilarating experience come from that, or is that not the case? If you were writing something, horrible and tragic, and painful, would that exhilaration maintain itself even then?
Probably, but also in like a negative way because I would also be feeling the pain and the sad, and then I would just want to. I wouldn't say like write as fast as possible to get it over with, but definitely I'd want to like immerse myself into those feelings so as to accurately capture them, and then also get through the scene so I can make my characters stop hurting sooner.
It's interesting. That really strikes me because I think there was a time where I did share that experience, and now listening to you recount it, maybe I should look back to that time myself. So thank you for that. Uh, I
I'm happy to
appreciate
help.
that. No, no, really, because it does say something, because I've been wondering about the type of author that does, let's say, that the process of writing isn't horrifically exhausting. And it's come to me to be that. There was a time right at the beginning where I could write for as long as, like you just said, as long as you could until like something got in the way and made you stop. So here's a question: since we're hurtling toward the end of the podcast, we have perhaps another 15 minutes at the most. What are your goals for your book? Like, I should ask that question a better way. What do you hope that your books and your stories do to and for the people who read them?
I definitely want to entertain people. Um, I want to make them laugh. I want to give them like characters that they can get attached to. Um, and give them fun little escapism adventures. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm primarily an entertainer.
That's interesting too. Do you think that's part of that enthusiasm and that exhilaration?
Absolutely.
Yeah, to want other people to feel that same positivity. That might be something worth considering as well. Perhaps I've been corrupted by, um, I don't know, millennial nihilism in academia there. Perhaps we all have. Oh, friends and fellow philosophers listening. Um, I think it's perhaps an important lesson that we could all take to remember the, um, be a bit Nietzschean about it, but the Dionysian aspect of things, or the Dionysiac, the value of the intoxication of just having fun, right? Just enjoying aspects of life, and you're actually enjoying the writing, hoping that other people enjoy the reading. um, I think that for artsier types, or for uh, people who are perhaps terminally online, we forget that sometimes. We get too much into the, let's say, the desire to be a part of some type of struggle against something, perhaps. But I might be, uh, you know, so to say, like waxing up a tree, like a dog barking, but with tree. No, forget that I said that. Um, so if we would, I have perhaps a slew of very, very fun questions. Um, let's see if which one I want to ask first. I've already asked you about whether there was a cliche that you disliked quite a lot. Um, are there any? Oh, actually, before we do that, I did want to ask this couple questions about publishing. So you went in and you did the trad pub run, and presumably it was roundly rejected. Is that right?
It was. I queried for like a year. There was zero interest. Um, and then also there was I had it developmentally edited before I started querying, and I did get a round of dev edits. Um, but after that round, the editor kind of like ghosted me. So I wasn't even sure if I like fixed the problems correctly. And I think that was part of the reason that I was like, oh, maybe that's why nobody wants this. Maybe I should just like not do this. And I started like seeing all these things about like, oh, like all these stats where the average traditionally published book sells like 12 copies in its entire lifetime. And also, if you get traditionally published, the marketing is on you and you won't have complete creative control over like the cover or whatever. And also you won't get as many royalties. And I'm like, this is stupid. So at that point I was like, okay, if I publish something, I'm going to do it myself so I at least stand the chance of like breaking even. Um, so that was when I made the switch.
Yeah. For those of, and you probably know this now. And let me know if you know it now. But probably the rejections came from the fact that it wasn't read at all. I don't know if you know this or so an agent gets like hundreds of manuscripts like a week, probably 100 a day even. It's some unreadable amount. They form a slush pile, and it's not uncommon in a day where the agent is tired, looks at the slush pile, knock that in the garbage, start with a new pile, like whatever comes in the next day. Were you? I mean, you probably weren't aware of that at the time. Were you aware that
Oh, I
that's
didn't
like
even
super
send the
common?
manuscripts. I was doing query letters and then like however many chapters they
Yeah,
requested
that's what.
for
Well,
an
I
initial
should I
query.
should say that. That's what I mean. Like even those like couple page queries, like most of that doesn't get read because like they're getting I don't know how many emails a day, every single agent. So
Yeah,
yeah. So for
I
the if you
got
didn't
pretty
know,
much form rejections across the board, except for one rejection who said that they liked my style and would like to see me submit something else if I was interested. They just weren't a fan of the story.
yeah, that's very common. And anyone who's tried traditional publishing, if you've tried it in the past, listeners out there, don't let that discourage you. That is how it is. And it's getting tighter and tighter and tighter. Now, you indie published. Uh, how are you enjoying the indie publishing scene? Are the ardors of wearing all the hats, as they say, are those fun to wear? Are you enjoying learning the skills necessary, or has it proven a challenge? Yeah, how's that experience been for you as an indie?
Been very valuable experience, I will say that much. A lot of it has been fun. Marketing has been kind of frustrating-ish, but nothing I can't really handle. The worst was probably formatting. Trying to get this PDF correct was an absolute nightmare. I was ready to pull my hair out. I think because I started with like Ingram Spark and their book builder, and that was just being very annoying. And then I switched to KDP and then using their template. But little errors kept cropping up. But thankfully, thank the Lord, my dad works in IT, and my mom used to be a graphic designer. I had very I had very helpful people, very experienced people to rely on for like those weird little problems. Like why is the margin like why is the header this size on the odd numbered side pages and then like half an inch larger on the even side page? How do I turn this off? Why is this happening? There was just a bunch of weird things that just like popped up that we didn't know, but we managed to tinker with. Um, but yeah, without my parents, I definitely wouldn't have gotten this far. Not only because of the obvious, but their support and um, their constant encouragement. So, but yeah, the writing, the editing, those ones I'm pretty okay with. Um, it was definitely just the formatting that was the most frustrating. I was ready to throw
Yeah,
my computer.
for formatting. I it took me. I published Salt, Sand, and Blood. It's the first time I really had to format something properly, and I wrestled with Microsoft Word, particularly when you're dealing with pagination and headers and footers. Um, Microsoft Word hides, if that's what you're even working in. Other ones, I don't know if
Oh,
they're
it
any
was.
better,
Yep.
but yeah, it hides things from you in weird and unnecessary places. Um, and yeah, it's a huge pain. Now that I've gone through it, for those of you listening, I do offer formatting services. So if you don't have wonderful parents like Molly Blake, and you'd like your manuscripts formatted, you could send me an email. Go to my contact form, wildoutlit.com. But shilling aside, now that you are an indie and you're having to do all your own marketing, you're having to do kind of your own community building. What a question is, do you play? Actually, I think you've done this already. Um, Collaborations with other indies. Have you done any of these before?
Yes, actually. Probably my first indie author friend. Um, because when I first started like trying to get myself out there and like making accounts on things and making a website, I was very reluctant to talk to strangers on the internet because I was raised not to do that. Um, and I followed other people, but I was like not super duper chatty. But then one day, Usagi, aka Maya Tenshi, author of Dracula's Guest, she left a comment on one of the anthologies of Vampire Mall Cop shorts, and she's like, "Hey, this is pretty fun. Would you want to write like a crossover for funsies?" So that's what we did. We had Dracula come to the mall twice. We had him and Damien fight communists twice, and it was great, and it was so fun. And I was like, "Oh, not everyone on the internet's a serial killer. Yay!" And then from there, I started like reaching out to other indies, and they're all very nice and so sweet and so supportive, and they love doing things with other people. And it's been a great time. Um, I did they're they're the crossovers with me and Usagi, which can be found on Minds and on our respective websites, I believe. I'm currently in a online D&D campaign with Usagi, Matt Waterhouse, P. Alex Ratcliffe, and Ninja Togepi, who is an artist online. And that's a lot of fun because it's my pretty much my first D&D campaign, and it is very beginner friendly, which makes me very happy. Um, I've been on several several podcasts, and those are always great, and I'm always happy to be on those. Lots of people are like, "Hey, do you want to like do an author interview like on my blog or something?" And I'm like, "Me," and they're like, "Yay, happy to have you," and I'm like, "Yay, happy to be here." Um, so yeah, it's people are there and they're happy to like meet new people and work with new people and give uh small authors these opportunities, and it's really nice because it's
Yeah.
really great not being alone in this whole thing.
Yeah, the sense of community is something that is very difficult to obtain. Um, even if you've got in-person writing groups, I've talked to people who they attempt to form those, but they end up being kind of not about the writing and about something else, usually some form of politics, and it sours things. So I'm glad you're able to find that. I didn't know you were in a D&D campaign. I actually am aware of all of those people. So That's super cool. You'll have to. Are you streaming the campaign anywhere, or is it just a private affair?
Alex does stream it on YouTube and I think Twitter.
Is that the blue dandelion thing I've been seeing him post?
That is the blue dandelion thing.
All right, so listeners, go check out Molly B playing D&D with T. Alex Radcliffe, Matt Waterhouse, um, Ninja Togepi, and I'm missing one person. Am I not?
He's in there too.
Who's that?
Usagi Tenchi, Amaya.
So Amaya's playing too. Oh yeah,
Yes.
the legendary Amaya Tenchi of Dracula's Guest is playing. So you can't beat that team. Go check that out. And we'll send people to the rest of where they can find your stuff. But before we do, I think I have time for one more question, and that question is going to be I had it. I had it. Let me find it again. Molly, don't let me lose the question on air. I guess we're not on air. We're recording. But oh, of of all your writing, what, if anything, what is the most annoying and most common misread that you have? So you have people reading your works, and they read something into your work that's you don't think is there. Um, is there anything like that that plagues you that you find to be just terribly annoying that you want to rage against here on the Wild Owl podcast?
Um, there haven't really been any common ones. I've had a few amusing ones though.
What's the most amusing
Um,
one then?
this one came pretty recently. I so I never specified Ben's age in the novel, and I'm not sure about the shorts either. I don't even know. Um, but when I told a reader that he was 45, um, this poor reader, my poor friend, I it almost sent him into like catatonic shock because he thought he was like much younger and sprier than that. He was thinking like 30 or something, and I was like, nope, 45. So that was the most recent one, and one that I still get a little chuckle about.
Oh, well, that surprised me because I thought Ben was in his like mid to late 20s. So that's the two of us. All right. Well, thank you, Molly, for joining us here today. Before we go, where can people find your stuff? Where can they find Vampire Mall Cop and um, the web serial or anything else that you want people to take a look at?
So the book is available definitely on Amazon. I think as ebook pretty much everywhere. Um, I'm trying to get the paperback wide released, so it should be available also in other places, but I'm not sure, but definitely Amazon. The web series can be found on my website. That is Molly B dot spelled out dot blog dot actual dot wordpress dot also actual dot com. I didn't have the money to buy a domain name. Yay. And then I, as a person, am on Minds and Twitter. Uh, and I am on Minds, I'm Molly underscore B. And then on Twitter, I'm Molly underscore B underscore author.
All right. Well,
That
thank you,
is
Molly.
where I can be found.
So all of you go follow Molly over on um, the platform formerly known as Twitter, minds.com. If you're ever in that space, go pick up a copy of a Vampire Mall Cop. You will not be disappointed. If you are afraid you will be disappointed, you're a fool. But then go read the web serial for free and then discover what it is that you are missing. All right, this was a lot of fun, Molly. Thank you for joining me on the podcast, and I hope to have you back on it again.
I'd be happy to. This was great. I had so much fun. And the black shirts didn't get me, to my knowledge.
No, no black shirts, no brown shirts. Until next time.